All right, we've had a lot of requests for a covering video. This is going to be a quick one. It's not going to be necessarily completely in-depth, but it's just going to be a quick little, probably 10-15 minute video on how Dad does some of his covering here. So what's the first step for if you're going to do the wing here, Dad?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is measure from the center section to its longest point. And we're at the center section, we got 32. So I'm going to make that 32.5 so I have a little excess in either direction. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the width. Since I'm only covering to this spar, because this portion of the tip will be blue and this portion will be white, I want enough to overhang this spar. So I want about a 1/2 inch above that. And since I'm going to seal the hinges, which we're going to show, I'm going to go at probably 9.5 to 10 inches. I'm probably going to go at 10. Then the next step is to lay out exactly what you're going to do. So we're going to do 10 inches and 32. We're going to need 4 of those, and you want to utilize as much of the covering roll as you can. So you have to sometimes lay it out. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do, I'll go down here and do 10 more inches at that point. And we're just basically roughing that in there. We need 4 of these, since the top and bottom get covered the same. I'm using a drywall square. Just draw that out. And I'm going to go a little bit beyond that so I know where I'm at for the next piece. And again, this isn't necessarily rocket science to get this dead perfect, but I want it as perfect as I can get it. So we're going to do 4 sections of this. Now what I need to do is figure out, do I continue down this way? I can get another one up here, I'll get another one here and another one here. That'll leave me enough covering to do most of the tail portion of the plane. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these out and we'll pick up from there.
All right, so real quick, why don't you walk us through what tools you have out here?
Okay, I have my cover tuggers. These are used for sometimes pulling around tips and things. They're available from Ohio Superstars. Work out really, really nice. Pair of scissors, X-Acto knives. I use 2 irons. One set at a lower temperature for doing covering over top of covering so it doesn't pull it or sag it. Basically, I use it kind of as a trim iron. This is my main sealing iron, and it's set at a much higher temperature. Also use a little hanger 9 trim iron, and also a wood burning pencil. And we're going to go through what we use that for. You'll see as I cover. I have my 4 pieces cut out, all of them the same, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. One thing I want to note, with monocoat or ultra coat, today I'm using ultra coat, you have to be careful how you peel it. If you peel it too fast, you can get a crease in it, and the crease will never come out. I mean, it'll come out as far as shrinking it, but you want to pull it nice and even and straight off, because if it gets a little seam in it, you will see it. I'm going to go ahead and get started this. Now we have our actual piece of covering film. We're going to lay this out. I want enough of this covering film to go over the top of that spar, because I'm going to seal it down against the edge of that spar, because I don't want it to pull loose, because I'm covering this, rather than covering it all in one piece and then covering over top of it and making it even heavier, we're going to do this like so. Now that I've got that very close to about 1/4 inch over that, I'm just going to tack in each one of those bays. I'm just going to kind of pull it with my finger a little bit toward the center, and I'm going to tack it there. Now, you can see I'm getting to this servo well, and what I'm going to do here at this point, I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and go right against the edge of that and cut. And I'm going to pull that in. I'm going to push that in with my fingernail so I can kind of see exactly where I'm at. I'm going to go right down that seam. We're going to go right up against that one. I'm going to push down here and do the same thing. Now we've cut out for the servo well. And you always have, depending on how much time you want to spend, you'll end up with a little bit that you might want to paint later. I'll probably paint the top. I'm going to take my trim iron. I'm going to seal that down and seal that down. Just kind of, all I'm doing is just kind of tacking this in place for right now. Now, this is a handy spot to use the wood burner, and you got to be very careful with this. It burns it really quick. I'm just going to kind of go right around it, and as we get further into the video, you'll see I use this to actually trim out around that. But I'm going to pull that kind of tight to this edge, grab my hot iron, and tack that right there. So now that that's done, I'm just going to kind of go down the middle section here, like this. And I'm going to put this down to the spar pretty good right now. Just all the way down there. I want a nice, good seal. And I'm going to pull that tight to the tip. And the same thing, just kind of sealed nice and tight. Now, since we're going to seal hinges, and this is something that most people don't know how to do or have never done, I'm going to look for my aileron where my spot is. I'm going to take the X-Acto knife. I'm going to go right into that and pull straight out, because we are going to seal these hinges. Down here on this end, we don't have that same type of gap. So what I want to do is line up with my scissors and go right down. I'll flip it over so it's easier to see. I want to cut straight down to that hinge line. Okay, now that that is done, this is something that most people, when they cover, don't do. And it really makes a nice, neat job if you spend the time to do it. We're going to take this aileron. This is very important to pull it all the way down as tight as you can get it in its down position. Now I'm going to take the iron and I'm going to pull toward me like this. And I'm sealing the back edge of this. I'm not touching the aileron itself. I'm just going across the trailing edge. Okay, I'm going to get kind of close to this right here, as close as I can. And I'm also, at this point, going to seal this area here around it. Same thing with this trailing edge here. I want to seal that portion. This up here, we're going to seal. And again, I'm going to pull this down across the wingtip. Just right there like that. Now, in order to seal the hinge, a lot of times with ailerons and elevators, you can get trapped air bubbles underneath them. Doing it this method, you can see I'm just pressing it down, and I have no air bubbles because they're pushing out over the top. And I have to hold this down. If you don't, you're going to end up with a mess.
Now, this method of the sealing the hinges, that also can help mitigate your flutter, also correct?
That is 100% correct. You can see that aileron is bubble free. Now I'm going to go across the top of the trailing edge. Now, I didn't mention when I started, always make sure that the wing or whatever you're working on is always clean and free of dirt, and you final sanded it and got it where you want it to be. Now you can see I'm actually going across the hinge line, and you can see all the wrinkles coming out of that hinge line. That's what I want. We're going to keep going like that. I'm going to work up into this area, and I'm going to push over toward the center section. We're going to get all this. Now that that is sealed, what I'm going to do, this is ironed down really well. You can see I'm pushing the air bubbles out of there. They're all gone. I'm going to take this, I'm going to fold it up with my fingernail, pressing against it. Look at that. Look at that beautiful seam. You can see those hinge lines are completely sealed. I have full deflection. Now,
and do you have any problem with, does that take away from your total throw at all?
Now, as long as you hold it all the way down and you have the monocoat this way, in the future when you're shrinking this, it's very important that you push this down in order to shrink. Let's say you had a wrinkle in this area. You can use an iron, or you can use even the covering gun. But you have to make sure that this is deflected all the way, because if you shrink this in this position, then you'll end up having to cut the monocoat off of it. Now, what we're going to do, just to make sure this is stuck good, I'm going to take my sealing iron and go right down that edge, just like this.
And in case anybody has an iron like that, what temperature are you?
I have it on the highest setting.
Okay.
I'm just going to push against that edge with the back side of it. And there we have a sealed hinge. Now, we still have a ways to go here. But you can see, so far so good. Now, the next thing I like to do is start my trimming process. On the edge here, because we're rolling up so high, I'm going to leave myself a little bit of covering right there, like that. And I'm going to take this iron and I'm going to pull it down right over that edge. You can see that just made a beautiful edge. Nice and clean. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this edge down. I'm pulling everything toward the outside. I've got that edge down. I'm going to kind of seal the edge there a little bit. I'm going to seal this edge and right there, and we're going to iron that out. Beautiful tip. Okay. Now we're ready to start trimming some of this off and getting ready to do this upper spar. But the first thing I'm going to do is I like to always start with the bottom of the wing first. That way I can fold all these edges up, make the top look nice and neat. Now that's down. Go like this. This all ironed down. And my next piece of covering will make this look really nice. But I'm going to take the covering, I'm going to roll it over the back of the aileron. And it's important to kind of roll the iron around the edge. I like to work with it just like you're seeing me do. I like to take it and just kind of roll the aileron into it. Because if you don't, you can end up with a nasty little crease. So we're doing this. And we're ready to trim these areas off. And I'm just going to take the old pair of scissors. And I like to just lay them right up against the edge. Like this, get it started. And just let it glide right down. Like this. Not much scrap. Okay, now we're going to do this piece. I like to leave quite a bit on this one so I can roll it over, tuck it real nice. And in order to do that, we're just going to take this and again pull and roll. Now we're not going to worry about these frayed edges hanging over the side. I'm going to show you what we're going to do with those. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm just going to roll that little edge over. And what that'll do is make it easier for me to do the top side. Because then I'll just have to just barely cut that edge and we'll have a beautiful piece.
Out of curiosity, how many planes would you say that you've covered?
I have no, it's a lot. It's in the, well into the hundreds. Okay, I'm gonna roll this up and tuck it over. And we're gonna tuck that over. Now, you can see our bottom edge is starting to look pretty nice. Now, I'm gonna take this, I wanna fold a lot of this edge over, because that makes it, in the future when you shrink it, it makes it better to do. Any place there's a spar, we're going to take a pair of scissors, we're going to clip the width of the spar. And you'll see why here in a second. See, this here is gonna leave a nasty little burr. See, I covered all that up. Now, I'm gonna take this iron and just kind of, again, fold and tuck that in. You can see by the way, this is a Cadet LT25 wing that I'm covering, and I'm gonna roll those up onto that like that, like that. Right now you're going, oh, it looks like he's got a mess going on, but it's really not. We'll show you what we're gonna do next. Next, I'm gonna come back over to my little soldering pencil, or wood burner in this case. You have to be very careful. This thing is really hot. I'm gonna take stuff like this. If you watch closely, I don't like that edge, so I'm just gonna go like that, and that really seals it down good. You can see that's don't want that to interfere with anything. Then we're going to take this up here. I'm just going to lightly go around that corner because I don't want that edge. I'm going to smear it a little bit. Same thing here. Just a light little. Now we have these little frayed areas down here. What I'm going to do, because we can't get in there real tight with the big iron, I'm going to take the trim iron. I'm going to push those out to the edge. Just like this. Now then, I have this little edge hanging over, and I'm going to take the pencil and just burn that because it seals it down really tight when you do that. And I'm going to go right into that hinge line right there, just like that. Now that won't peel off. And if you like, you can cover these edges, or what I like to do is just paint them. I'll just paint those edges white. Now that we've done that, our next step is to secure this to this spar, because if I put my next piece of covering on here, odds are it could pull loose. If you want to do a good quality job, you just take a pair of scissors and cut here at every rib. Right down to the spar. And what this will do is it'll keep that covering very secured. Okay, now, with that in mind, we're going to do one last thing. And that is going to be to take an X-Acto knife. And everywhere there's one of these ribs, we're just going to cut this covering away like that. Okay. Now then, I'm going to take my trim iron and I'm just going to roll it over like that. And I'm not necessarily too concerned at this point about how well it's sticking down, because I'm going to hit this with the big iron. I just like to lay it over with the trim iron. If you don't have a trim iron, you can do it with a big iron. I just like to kind of tack it into place. Now if that's held like that, then I'll take my big iron and just take the tip of it, and I want to really seal that down good. Trim out around that. I have free range again. All right. We have a completed bottom side. Aileron's fully functional. Look at the hinge line. It looks great. You don't see any hinges in there, and it's nice and sealed. And we're going to go ahead and finish the other 3 panels, and then we're going to show how to put on the outboard trim section.
All right, we're back. He's got all the other panels done with the white. Now he's gonna start on the blue. Anything to note right off the rip here?
No, I've already notched this out for around the servo well, and I'm using my lower temperature iron, and I'm going right down the top of the spar. And I'm just going to tack just along those edges. Now what I want to do is I want to kind of pull it tight. I want to make sure I'm lined up with my spar. I'm going to go right here. And we're just going to kind of follow this down. And again, push it out. Kind of holding it with my finger out here on the edge. And again, this iron is nowhere near as hot as the iron I actually apply covering with. And we've got a little bit of a wrinkle there. So what I'll do is I'll just let the iron ride over top of it, kind of shrink, and then press it down. And that's a common thing. If you get a wrinkle, just kind of heat it. Now, as that's sealed down, I'm just going to pull right across that leading edge like this. Now, here we are in an actual spot where I'm going to use the cover tuggers. Okay, Matthew, you want to come here and help me out here? Here's where the cover tuggers come in handy. We're going to go ahead and pull this edge a little bit. Right there on that edge. So you just kind of wrap it around. That's good. And we're going to pull this edge. Kind of pull it around that edge. Hold my... Oh, good. Okay. Now up in here you can see you've got like a little buckle. We're just going to go ahead and pull that out. And we're going to pull it around that curve. That's good. And that's all there is to it. We're going to take that out. Now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and take this and we're going to trim around it. Just like this. Give yourself a little bit of slack like this. Okay. Now, a lot of times you can fold over and this edge will actually poke out. So what I like to do is just cut a little bit of an angle on it so that that doesn't happen. Just kind of trim that off, and then we're going to take this and roll it around these edges. And what I'm going to use for this is the hotter iron. I'm just rolling this around the edge. Okay, now that I'm this far, I'm going to go ahead and clip where these spars are. Otherwise, I could have a potential wrinkle. So what we're going to do is grab the trim iron. I'm going to put these down. This is one of the things that you can't really get in an ARF, is the detail and covering like this, to where you put it down good. Tack that spar down. Okay. Now we're going to roll this leading edge around. And again, we're going to use the hot iron for this. I really want to seal this down nice. And you just walk it around. Walk it around, keep rolling the edge. Get a couple wrinkles, you just roll them right out. I'm not going to claim that I am the greatest coverer in the world. I'm proficient at it. I can get them done, they're strong and in good shape. I'm just going to keep rolling that edge. And again, here's a good example. If I have some wrinkles up in here and I don't want them to ball up. So I'm gonna lightly put the iron on them and just kind of pre-shrink them without pressing down. Now I'm gonna press a little bit and just push them out. Now that this is sealed good on this side, I'm gonna go ahead and shrink it with the shrink gun. And then we're gonna do the other side, then the top, and I'll show you how we finish it off. Now, the nice part of this is I don't have covering over top of the covering, which can sometimes give you wrinkles, and it also makes the plane heavier. Tip. Now you can see I'm not 100% shrunk out because I'm going to take the iron now, the hot iron. And I got to be careful to move quickly along this spar edge. I want to seal it down good. So we're going to go like this, get all these edges nice. And I'm going to move relatively quick across that spar because I don't want it to pull, as it started to do right there. We're sticking it to these forward and aft spars here good. Rolling right around this edge. I'm rolling right up into there. And that is stuck on there good. Now, we have a couple bubbles. I'm going to show you how we can get bubbles out. You can use a pen. You can use the tip of an X-Acto knife. But these bubbles will always reappear. So I just take an X-Acto knife, or you can use a pen. And I just poke a couple holes in them to let the air out. And I'll go across it like this. No more bubbles. As you can see, she looks pretty good. We're going to finish the bottom side, and then we're going to close up with the top, and we're going to add our stripe. All right. Okay, we're going to finish up. I already did one part of the top side. The bottom is done. Looking pretty good. We still have a little ways to go yet. I'm going to finish up this top piece. I'm just tacking it in place. I tacked it on both ends. Just kind of, again, with the cooler iron, I'm going to push it out. With that tacked in place, I'm just going to roll the edges a bit. I'm going to leave that like that. I'm going to kind of tip this down. I'm going to work this tip. Shouldn't need to cover tires on this. I'm going to use a hot iron because I want it to really kind of bite good on that cover. I'm just going to kind of pull it back. A lot of guys have trouble with tips like this, and just one of those things you got to experiment, try different things. But what I'm going to do now is finish sealing the top of this. and making sure that this covering flashes into the next covering. I'm just going to use the cooler iron. You can kind of see it along the edges, just kind of flash in with the other. It becomes seamless. You look at it certain ways, you can see the seam, and you just want to iron that seam down. That's what we're doing right there. Just ironing that seam so it becomes seamless. Now I'm going to take the hot iron and I'm going to pull on it and roll over the edge like this. Just kind of lay a line down on it now. Okay, now here's what we're going to do in this tip. In order to make this tip look nice and seamless up here, I'm going to leave myself about 1/8 of an inch, around maybe 3/16. I'm just going to follow that contour all the way around, like that. Then I got to look at how it's going to fold. I'm going to put a little relief cut right there. Now I'm going to take this cut with my hot iron and I'm going to work from the top and roll around that edge, just like this. Just keep rolling it around the edge. And you can see it looks a little wrinkled up there, but watch what happens. I keep rolling around the edge. And rolling. And I start to push over and seal down. And you're going to notice that the seam will disappear. Notice the seam is pretty much gone. And that seam is completely rolled out and gone. We've got a really nice edge there. Now, I'm going to final this piece here. I'm just trimming right along the edge of the leading edge here at the bottom so it overlaps and we don't see that seam on the top side. That's why I like to do the bottoms first. So now we can take this, and again, everything's a rolling action. I just do a section like this and just keep rolling the wing with the iron. And again, you want to look at that seam and you can tell when it's glued shut because you should no longer be able to really even detect it. If you have it ironed down good, you shouldn't even be able to see it. Okay, so now we've got that sealed all the way around and it's good up here. So now I'm just going to take my iron and start shrinking it a bit so I can stick it to those spars. I don't want to go too crazy out on this edge because that's when I'll pull the covering. I'm just kind of going bay by bay and sticking it to the to the spars. You can see it shrinking up nice. See a little edge there. As long as you move fast with the hot iron, you shouldn't pull it, but particularly now that it's been laying on this covering, it's cooled down a bit too. When you have it continuously on something, they do cool down. Now we're over top of where the sheeting is, and I'm going to push the air as much as I can to the outside edge, kind of in a circular motion. Now we're starting to get a little bit of wrinkles where I'll go light and then hard, light, hard. And again, circular motions. A lot of times where there's glass tape, you'll end up with some wrinkles, but they can come out. I'll show you how to do that. We're gonna smooth those little, you can see a little bit of bubbling right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the heat gun. Because now that both pieces are sealed to each other, I'm gonna take the heat gun and just go across and shrink it right into that fiberglass. Right down the seam of the whole thing. Since this is the top, we want it to look good. Okay, now with that done, we're just about ready to put the stripe on. But what I like to do is any little small detail stuff, like right here, there's a little air bubble. I'm gonna just kind of work it out with the trim iron again in a circular motion. And I'd say we have that pretty darn good. Okay, now one other thing that we're gonna do, and this is something that you can do with any servo well. I'm gonna show you, I covered over the top of this. And if you had a servo well of any kind, this is what you do, cover over it. And again, take your pencil, just go around it like this, pull it out. And then you can take this and just really smooth the edges up. And this will all cut off with an X-Acto knife, or you can even peel it. But that cutout is now perfect, and it's sealed at the edges because the iron, or that thing, is so hot. It melts that plastic right down to the edge. So that and you could paint around this edge. I mean, I just kind of, it is on the inside of the plane. You don't see it really, but I like to try and make it look as neat as I can, and these could be painted as well. But we're gonna go ahead and see what we have here. We're gonna go ahead and add our red stripe, because that's what the LT looks like. So that'll be next. Okay, so I'm finishing up the Cadet LT 25 wing. I've got the bottom done. I got my first top stripe laid, and I'm going to put on the last stripe. And I'm going to show you how we do it. I use covering to make my stripes with, because it stays down. This is the wrong piece. There we go. So what I'm going to do, since that's where I left off, I'm going to kind of get that close to where I know it needs to be. Could you hand me that trim iron there? I'm going to line this up. Oftentimes people ask me, do I prefer monocoat or ultra coat? And it really depends on what I'm doing, because monocoat is a stronger covering. Despite what anyone says, it has a very high torsional strength to it, very high. And it's perfect. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling this tight, and I'm sealing both ends, just like this. I'm getting that down pretty good. Now I've got a little tab hanging over, which is what I want. I'm going to set this down, and I'm going to grab my iron, the not so hot iron, and I'm going to just lightly start tacking it down. Otherwise, this stripe will move on us. It will definitely move. So now I'm tacking it down, and I'm going to go in a circular motion again. Just kind of walk right down it. You can see it sealing the edges, just like that. See, this is a stripe that's not going to come off. It's not a sticker. It's not going to roll off. It's actual covering. And it adheres to that really well. But anyway, Ultra Coat has, for a job like this, it does a really nice job. It's a little more transparent than other coverings. Now what I'm going to do for our last piece is I'm just going to take this, because this lines up with the bottom, and I'm going to cut that off right at the wingtip. Now I'm gonna use my hot iron and I'm gonna roll that drape right into the bottom, just like that. And that's how the L225 wing is supposed to look. And you can see with our sealed hinges, we have full deflection either way. No air can get in between them. And we have a nice, straight, wart-free, beautiful wing.
Yep, hopefully that answers some question for some people. And if they have any questions, put it down in the comments below and he'll answer them for you. So, that's
Thanks a lot.